So I figured I'd do a devlog. This is mostly just to cement the ideas I'm working on better in my mind. But if someone finds it helpful or entertaining, then all the better. So for a while, I've been thinking about the right pathfinding algorithm for Rogue FP's sequel. And in Rogue FP, I was using A star, but I found jump point search, and I think that's the one I'm gonna go with. It has a few advantages and disadvantages, but overall, it's pretty good. So I'll show you how jump point works. So the way jump point works is it actually radiates out from each point, continuing on in that direction until it finds a corner, to put it pretty simply, as opposed to A star where it just uh, searches its immediate neighbors as it goes along. It'll just find a point, look at its neighbors, which ones are good, and then go back, pick the next good neighbor that was available, and then just keep going like that. Jump point will radiate out as far as it can until it hits either a wall or it finds a corner. And once it finds a corner, it'll grab that point, send that back, and then search throughout all the good corner points that it found. If I change my map like this, you see it couldn't find the target, but you can see how it started right here, and then it looked and it went radiated out through the room. It found this corner right here, literally this corner here, found that, put a point down, and then it radiates out from that point depending on the direction it went to get to that point. And so it finds this corner and it just puts a point. It doesn't necessarily have to go around the corner, but as long as it puts a point at that corner. And so it can go through each of these doors, I guess, to get to where it's going. If I move this, if I move the goal, so I move that to 15. Oh, no. 95 there. Move the X. Now you can see it actually found it. And this path is always optimal. If the algorithm's done right, it should be optimal. Now, the thing about A star is that it's quite a bit slower. These numbers, this number here is the time it takes for the algorithm to finish in microseconds. So in milliseconds, this would be 21 milliseconds, or 42 milliseconds, sorry. And so that is quite a bit over one frame. And so we can see here with jump point, it is actually quite a lot faster. Uh, just because it doesn't have to search, it doesn't have to take each individual tile and look around it to find possible candidates. It kind of just goes to that tile. Are there any corners? Is there anywhere we need to move around? And if no, it just keeps going in that direction until it hits a wall, basically. And you can see that it doesn't search every single one. If it finds the goal, it can bail. So A star is quite a bit worse if your map is pretty complicated. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be that much worse, because if you don't want an optimal A star path, you can actually just have it kind of be pretty greedy and not fully search outward. It won't balance. Normally, A star will balance the distance from the point you're at to the source with the distance to the target. But if you don't care about the distance from the source, you can just have it make a beeline for your target. And sometimes it works out pretty good, and sometimes it gets stuck and it slows down a lot. But the main problem with that is you will end up with non-optimal paths. You can see if a monster were to take this path, it would just be bumping up against all these walls and zigzagging a lot, because every time it goes into a room, we'll slow it down, it's trying as hard as it can to get to the point, to get to the goal. And when it can't, it'll just fill up, then spill out. But the problem is it never ends up searching optimally. It never actually goes in between this door and this door, because it wanted to get straight through this wall. And so you end up making a corner here. You end up having to turn there. If I kill that, if we do jump point slowly, it literally just goes from door to door, boom, 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 and then you're done. These numbers don't mean anything when I have slow enabled. It's tacking on the time to actually slow down the animation. So jump point is pretty good in that regard If you actually look up the paper that originally published and talked about jump point, it'll actually say it's better in pretty well every scenario than A star, like no matter what, essentially, which isn't actually the case. This map is pretty big, obviously, it's 100 by 100. If you have a small map and you have nothing, if your target has like just open sight right to the source, your start and your end, there's nothing in between it, jump point will almost always slow you down. Let me turn that off. See, in this case, if it's on a cardinal direction, jump point is still faster. If I move this over to 95 and I hit jump point, there you go. This is just the nature of the algorithm. It just has to, like, every time it makes one diagonal step, it has to go all the way to the right and all the way down. And so, you know, boom, A star. If you have clear line of sight, it's almost always faster. You're like, unless you're straight on a cardinal, then jump point will be faster. But, you know, if you're anywhere kind of in this area, the farther out diagonally, the farther it'll have to search. Now, if it's a small map, you know, it doesn't matter too much. Like, you know, A star, that's way under a frame. This is pretty slow, all things considered, but that is still under a frame if it's 10 milliseconds. So I guess that's still fine. In my case, I'll have a lot more halls and rooms and cellular automata type stuff if I do a jump point here. Yeah, in this case, you'll have with A star on a cellular automata. If it's greedy, it can make it. It can actually do pretty good. But that's assuming you don't have any pockets in it. If I were to move the goal, let's see here. If I were to move this over to, let's say, actually even just 10 on the X and 90 on the Y. If I were to move this here, yeah, see, there you go. If you have this massive pocket here, that will absolutely slow it down. So you can't really guarantee A star on a map like this. Even when it's greedy, you're gonna have quite a number of time just to get where it's going. And if you want an optimal path, you're looking at, you know, 2 or more frames depending on how you have it set up. Jump point. There's a lot of corners. It does have to roll through a lot of points, but it will get you your point. You know, and here it's under a frame. And with an optimal path. Now, an optimal path is not always necessary. You know, it depends on what you're pathing for. If it's like a monster doesn't always have to move perfectly, right? It's alright if a monster moves, you know, in a weird erratic pattern. Sometimes you might want it to, depending on the type of monster it is. But, you know, it's fine if that gives you a slower algorithm or a faster algorithm, but in this case you would have an optimal path and a slower algorithm, which basically isn't that doesn't really benefit you much in any way. You'd be better off taking an optimal path and just making it kind of wonky than having a slow and unoptimal path. I don't think it's worth it in that case. But jump point can work for pretty good for maps with a lot of chaff like this. Here's a maze. Let's see how we do. Hopefully I'm not on a wall. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now, one of the issues I have with this, not an issue, it's just the way the algorithm works that I haven't corrected yet, is that this will make diagonal moves in between corners like that. Like, not every roguelike allows that. I know, like, Angband does and stuff like that. Obviously, Rogue FP doesn't. You couldn't just, you know, face a corner like that and just walk right through it, just phase right through it like it was something you could actually see through. So I'll have to alter these to not have that. But in A star, that's pretty easy, and jump point is a little bit more annoying to implement. I have both of those disabled just to make these time comparisons fair. So, but yeah, even in a maze like this, jump point will actually work not too bad. You can see it's actually pretty slow here because it has to burn through all these points. It's not always perfect. It's not always faster. But it can be. Like, if I were to move this jump point, like the goal, to somewhere else on the map, it probably... Actually, let's keep that 90, and let's put this to 90 and see what we get. A star, There, you can see jump point's way faster. It's sort of just, it depends on the conditions. It's not always actually faster, like that paper would say. Let's see how A star does. I can actually speed this up. Yeah, you can see when it actually tries to be optimal and not greedy, it like spills out towards the target because it's checking everything quite a lot. And then jump point. This is what makes it a lot slower here, is that there's so many corners. It just has to go through everything. It doesn't actually have that big benefit of jumping across, a lot of distance. It's, almost tile by tile in this case. And that's why it's a lot slower. But even then, if it has a decently roughly straight line, it can be pretty fast, faster than even greedy A star. Oh, no, even greedy A star. I'm sorry. But then, so why not use greedy A star all the time? But, it's like I said, those pockets, you will pay when these pockets show up. If it has to go in one direction and it just wants to pile in, trying to break through a wall to get to the goal because it's trying to go straight there, you will pay for that in time. So, while jump point will basically go right there. And I think, for my purposes anyway, it'll be mostly cellular automata and halls and rooms of various shapes and sizes. And so I think that's where jump point actually excels the best, is where it can actually rip through rooms and hallways fast and make big jumps in distance. So if I do a jump point here, yeah, so that's pretty fast. And even greedy A star is slower than that, because you'll end up with pockets. I mean, obviously, in each dungeon, it's not going to be a straight shot from one direction to the other. You may have plenty of places where you'll have to go roundabout. So it makes a lot more sense to use jump point like that. And if you're going optimal, optimal pathing, it's basically a no-brainer. There is pretty well no point. In that case, other than clear line of sight from goal to target, or from start to target, jump point is actually better. If it is clear, this is basically the only time where an optimal A star is actually better than jump point. That's basically it. Any other case, it's not even close. So my main issue going forward is how to actually implement jump point in 3D, because it's not it's not too big of an issue to implement jump point just, along the floor of a 3D dungeon, because it's essentially just 2D, right? But for, creatures that can fly or hover or whatever, or if you allow the player to climb a wall, or I shouldn't say the player, if you allow a monster to climb a wall, or you have ladders, or you have this and that, right? It'll become 3D in a sense, and so you'll have to take that into account. There's some papers on it that I've seen, and some posts about 3D jump point, and there's a few other ways to optimize jump point that I'll have to take a look at. But I'll see how it goes. Another thing is that in 3D, you might have taller monsters and you might have shorter monsters, right? So in Rogue Sequel, I don't think I'll have it be, one tile. Every monster is the size of one tile, essentially. Unfortunately or unfortunately, it'll probably be the scale of Minecraft. It'll probably be, people are 2 tiles high, and some of the smaller things are 1 tile. It's just sort of that is actually a pretty good scale. If you have a tile be 3 foot by 3 foot, essentially, you have 6 foot for 2 tiles high, that actually does work out to a pretty good scale. So, with pathfinding like this, you do actually run into an issue where it's like, will you allow monsters to crawl? or not. So you'll have to figure that out, right? Or like if you're flying, how big is your actual monster? Are you in a regular shape? Because I've been thinking about having monsters that are more than one tile, obviously, but they might be, you know, obviously you think of like serpents or dragons or whatever. They could be serpentine. They could be completely irregular shapes. Their shape could change, and that gets pretty complicated. You'd have to roll into a lot of heuristics to actually figure out if a monster can get under something or through a hole or through this or that, through a door even, through a gate, something like that. That could be pretty difficult. Yeah, so flying monsters will be a big issue. And if it's in a dungeon, you know, depending on your idea of a dungeon, there might not be much room for flying monsters to begin with, but I would like to have some decently large cave portions. And you could have, obviously there's bats and things. So that could end up with a lot of complicated pathfinding, especially if they decide to chase the player through some tight spots, if they can actually get there. So we'll see. But on the other hand, jump point would actually be pretty decent for flying monsters, because the one downside of jump point is that let's say we have a big pocket of mud right in the middle of the map. Jump point can't actually account for that. It has to be, every tile has to be an equal every tile has to be equal cost. That's the one downside. So if you have a big thing of mud here, a monster would not be able to detect it. It would just go straight through. With A-Star, you can actually have variable cost. That's because it searches every single tile. So that's why it can actually factor in the cost of each tile. So I was thinking I might just, if I have mud here, I might actually have it put down a point when it detects a change in terrain type, and then just keep going like normal. And then when the terrain type changes back to normal, put down another point, and then keep going. And then I might actually A-Star around the bad terrain, if just to see if it's worth it. In some cases it might still actually be worth it just to go right through. And if your monster is like a zombie or something, I mean, it's not going to care anyway. It would only care if it was maybe a smarter monster, or if it was a group of monsters, they might figure, instead of all of us piling around, it might still make more sense for us to go right through. So there's cases where it might make more sense to mix both. I think that would be smart. But yeah, that's all I have right now for as far as how these two pathfinding algorithms pertain to roguelikes. So if I didn't explain anything clear enough, or if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll get to them eventually. Alright, see you next time.